So read, stuck on the block, read, sitting in the box, read. Yo, what's going on, people? This is Akala. This week's great read really should be in the great audiobook section. Reason being, I've not actually read this book, I must confess, but I love the audiobook so much that I bought a copy of the physical book and definitely will read it many times over. I'm not really an audiobook man. When I'm driving, I like to listen to music more time. You know, I'll listen to a few lectures and a podcast here or there. This is actually the only audiobook that I've successfully finished. And I did all three. It's a trilogy. I did all three of the trilogy. There's two trilogies, so I don't know whatever that means. A sextology, whatever the hell that means. Whatever the hell that is, right? Technical word. In the comments, you can let us know. But it was so good that I got through all three of the trilogy. Easily one of the best stories I've ever read or listened to. So creative, so expansive. This is Dune by Frank Herbert. Possibly the greatest science fiction book ever written. One of the great 20th century novels. It's indescribably genius. There's few things I've come across that are this expansive. It's set on, or begins on a planet called Arrakis, which is a desert planet. You know, I believe it's a bit of a metaphor for the Middle East, and there's a hell of a lot of, you know, less than subtle kind of allegory toward the history of Islam, and, you know, the Prophet and everything else. And this planet Arrakis has these massive desert worms on it that people ride, and it also has this geriatric spice called melange, and melange is the spice that the whole universe runs on. People are drugged on it, you know, technology runs on it, etc. Seems to me like a none too subtle metaphor for oil, but I could be wrong. But I think unlike a lot of, you know, if you think of like, this is going to sound rather blasphemous, but I'm going to say it anyway. If you think of like Lord of the Rings, for example, and a lot of fantasy stuff that is expansive and worldly and has its own language, and the writer has created a universe, a lot of that supersedes the development of the characters. If you think in those books, the world is first, the wizardry is first, the magicness of Middle Earth is first, and, you know, all of the kind of subsidiaries of J.R. Tolkien. What I think Frank has succeeded in doing here is having a big, expansive, incredible backdrop world, phenomenal character development. Like the level of attachment, you know, you feel for Paul Atreides or for his sister or for anyone else who's in the book. Or the characters are so well developed that you feel a real attachment to them, even though they're within this massive kind of expansive world. There was an attempt to make a film of it. One of my favorite writers ever, a man called Alejandro Jodorowsky, legendary writer and filmmaker, director, tried to make it, and the idea of Dune is so expansive that they couldn't make the film, and then they've just made a documentary called Jodorowsky's Dune about the failed film that was. I hear there was another actual, you know, version of Dune that was made, but David Lynch one, it didn't get the greatest of reviews. Shit happens. But this week's great read, arguably the greatest science fiction book ever written, one of the greatest stories I've ever come across, genuinely, even though I only audiobooked it. I will be reading this one again soon, many times throughout my life. It also, before we log off, I will say this, again, more so than other fantasy or sci-fi stuff, is really, you know, the level of literature, the way he uses language and words. It's not just all about the idea. Again, you know, another writer I love, like Philip K. Dick, for example, or even Orwell, their writing is very much about the idea. And it's, you know, and maybe the argument would be they didn't want the language to get in the way. But again, I think what Frank Herbert has done is managed to not only develop characters, not only create an expansive world, not only be rooted in history and mythology and have a great idea, but really, you know, the way he uses words, the poetic use of literature is just, it's just unbelievable. It's one of these things you read and you think, how can one human being be this bloody fucking clever? Pardon my French. Well, not even pardon my French, pardon my swearing. No offence to the French. I think English people, we can, you know, people who speak English can swear all by ourselves. This week's great read is Dune, the Dune Trilogy by Frank Herbert. Big up. So read, stuck on the block, read, sitting in the box, read.